Hello. So today I am doing my end of year wrap up where I talk about the best books, the worst books, my stats, and where I want to go from here. So we're going to start with my statistics because who doesn't like some facts? This year I read 402 books, which is redonkulous. I was on a book binge. I was pretty much just burning myself out in all creative areas, all hobby areas. Like I crocheted myself into tendonitis in both of my arms. I just wanted to ravenously consume whatever I could. And I did that thoroughly with the books. And I'm not going to do that next year. I'm trying to pull myself back and sort of take my time, slow down. I am a speed reader. And if a story is fantastic, I do just devour it like a flame. But I'm hoping to settle down a bit and read maybe a more manageable 5 books a week is sort of what I'm aiming for. It might be a bit more. I'm being kind to myself that I might read a bit more, but I'm hoping to step away from like the 20 plus books per week because my head is going to explode with all the stories that are contained in it. On to the next part of the stats. I read over 121,000 pages. I mostly gave books, my average rating was 3.5 stars, which is pretty decent. It's very hard for me to find a 5-star, and also I rarely rate things 1. I did DNF though 53 books, and I think the reason why there were so many DNFs is because this year I really stepped out of my comfort zone and decided to read across all genres, and because of that there were obviously certain books that I knew, oh, I'm not gonna like it, it's not to my cup of tea. So this year going forward, I am trying to be a bit more selective in what I read, do a bit more research into the book before I just pick it up and give it a go. I tend to just grab things by the covers and want to read them, but I'm still wanting to be open to reading across a whole range of genres. I don't want to go back to just limiting myself to books I know that I tend to love a lot. I want to be a bit more open. In terms of fiction and nonfiction, I read 79% fiction and 21% nonfiction, and that's pretty much the standard for me. I like to have a mix of the two. The main categories or genres that I read were fantasy, romance, YA, self-help, LGBTQIA, historical, contemporary, graphic novels, sci-fi, and psychology. The most read author of this year for me was T. Kingfisher, which is no surprise because whenever I find a new author, I do binge their works and I read everything they've got, and I've been doing that with T. Kingfisher. On to the best books of the year, and I have chosen 11 because 11 is my favorite number. So why not? And in 11th place, I have The Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This was such a surprise. It is a younger book. The protagonist is 14 years old, but she's so spunky and courageous and brave. And she lives in this world where there is magic, and she's one of the few that has magic, and they're called wizards. Her magic is baking magic. So she can tell bread and dough and things to cook perfectly, not to burn, and she can actually animate little gingerbread men to do her bidding. And she gets caught up in this murderer who is killing off wizards, and she's now the suspect, and there's this whole thing going on, and she's really having to grow up very quickly and help save the town. It was fun, and I ended up shedding a tear towards the end, so I had such a great time with it. I did rate it 4.75 stars, so it's not quite 5, but I still felt like it should be on the list because it was so close, it was this close. In the 10th position is Skin Kirks by Kristen Jacques. This is a second in a series. The original series I first read on Wattpad. It's a fantasy book, a dark fantasy, and you've got 2 twins, Azure and Armin, and they have magic, and they were living below ground because they believed that the above world was completely decimated by like these monsters and things. But then they become sick and they're abandoned to the upper world where they're captured by slave traders, and there's a whole shebang going on up there that they were obviously completely ignorant to, and they become separated, and it's sort of like their quest to get back to each other. They both have powers that are not like everybody else in the world, and people are wanting to control them so that they can obviously control their power, so they too can have the most power in this world. But it's well written, there's a lot of amazing characters, and I am loving the series. In 8th place, I've got What Kind of Woman by Kate Bayer. This is a poetry book, and the reason I put it on the list is because it was the best poetry book that I read this year, so I thought I should represent it in my top of, because a lot of poetry books I'll like maybe 2 poems out of the bunch, but this one I think I probably liked at least half, and it was engaging, and I'm interested to read more of their works. I'm also trying to incorporate some more poetry into my life. And yeah, also if anyone's got any recommendations for books for me down below based on my top 11, please let me know. I'm always up for more recs. In 8th place, we have Anatomy of Anxiety by Ellen Vora. So this was a good all-rounder on ways that you can sort of help to deal with your anxiety, manage your anxiety, keep the symptoms low. For me, the only thing that worked for eradicating it almost completely was psilocybin mushrooms, and I plan to do a video in January on that. But I have 2 children who have GAD, and I'm always trying to help them in any way I can to alleviate their anxiety. And so this one was really easy to digest. It had a plethora of ideas and things that you could use, and yeah. In 7th place, we have What the Fuck is Tarot and How Do I Do It by Bakara Wintner. This was my favorite tarot book of this year. So I just got into tarot and oracles, I think it was around March or April. And so I had to learn. I read a plethora of tarot books. This was my favorite because it had a real personality to it. You could see the author's style and her voice, and it was fun. It was really fun to read. So that's my favorite tarot book of the year, and that's why it's on my list. In 6th place, we have the Moon Cycle Cookbook. I thought I would show you some of the recipes while I talk about it. This is fantastic. It's all to do with like women's reproductive cycles and the different seasons that they have each month and what foods best nourish it. They also have like little activities to do during these cycles, which I think is fantastic. It's just an amazing book, and the food is also delicious. So I bought a copy of it to keep, and I only ever do that when I really, really love things. So recommend this book. In 5th place, we have How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. I have ordered a copy of this. I tend to mostly buy nonfiction because they're books that I can read over and over. If it's things that I feel are really helpful and motivating and inspiring, I like to have a copy to read when the moon strikes. So I read this because it's about how to keep house when you have conditions and issues and that make it seem so overwhelming and like you just don't know how to cope with it. I cannot recommend it highly enough to anyone that struggles with energy or moods or depression or illnesses, all that sort of thing, and attributes the state of their house to, are they successful in life? Are they thriving? If they've got a pile of laundry, it just shifts your perspective and gives you strategies on how to deal and cope and how to be kinder to yourself. And I couldn't recommend it highly enough. In 4th place, we have Shatters Souls by Beck Michaels. This is a 3rd in a series. It's a high fantasy book with witches and fallen angels and werewolves and all sorts of things, elves as well. And it's just, they're on a quest to find something to battle this evil. And I just really enjoy it. It has some great characters, a diverse mix of characters. I love the protagonist. I like the romance in it as well. I'm here for the romance. And I have been loving making my way through it. In the 3rd place, we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This was a last minute edition, but I had to include it in this year's because I loved it. You've basically got a woman named Nora who is having a very hard time in life, and she ends up committing an act that causes her to wind up in this sort of in-between liminal purgatory kind of world where there's a librarian, there's shelves filled with books, and those books are all the lives she could have led if she had made a different choice, if she had not done or done something that she had regrets about. So it was fascinating to see her go through all of her different lives and all the lessons and the things that she learned from all of them, and I had a really fun time reading it. In 2nd place, we have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Yeah, I love this. This is what introduced me to the world of T. Kingfisher, and I'll be forever grateful, but I just love Nettle and Bone. It had so much atmosphere. I loved the witches, I loved the magic, I loved all of the characters. It was a little motley crew of a found family sort of situation, and I adored them all. The love interest was a little flat. He was the only character that wasn't really fleshed out, but I just loved the family and the betrayal and the quest and all of it, everything to do with it. The Bone Dog, loved it to bits and pieces. That is Nettle and Bone. In my number 1 position, we have League of Gentlewomen Witches by India Holton. This is the 2nd in a series. I didn't really like the first one. I read the 2nd one first by accident. It just happened that way. But this book, oh my God, I still remember how I felt reading it. I was smiling. I was laughing out loud. I was getting all those little chills and that tingle of excitement in my heart, reading it. It was such a fun time. I love the romance, I love the hijinks, I love the characters, the world, the dialogue, everything. I'm hoping that the third book in that series will be just as good as the second, because yeah, the first one just didn't work for me, but this book, oh, it's just, oh, I love it so much. And now we're going on to the second part, my least favorite books of this year. I will not be including almost all of my DNFs because there were so many, and that was mostly due to me reading out of my genre. In the future, I don't know if I'm going to do the DNFs as the worst books of the year, or if I'm going to do the ones I actually rated low. I'll decide when the time comes, but this year I'm just doing mostly the books that I rated 2 or 1 stars, which almost never happens because I tend to DNF if I know I'm not going to like a book, but sometimes I do push through, and this is the result of that. So in 5th place, we do have the only DNF, which is Curse the Day. I cannot believe this book was published. To sum it up quickly, it basically reads like a 12-year-old wrote it, and all of the adult characters in this book sound like what a 12-year-old thinks adults sound like. It was just so badly written. I was cringing. It was awkward. It was laugh out loud funny because of its terribleness. And that's not really what you want in a book. You don't want to be laughing at how bad it is. There was just all these, every single creature that you can imagine, angels, fairies, leprechauns, whatever you can think of, all thrown in, and all just so ridiculous. The pacing was just wild. Like the most fast-paced book that I've ever read. It was pretty much all dialogue. That's how it went. So what blows my mind the most with this book, it's got over 4 ratings on Goodreads. Over 4 stars. It made me feel like I was taking crazy pills, because I don't understand how people could rate that book that many stars when it is what it is. I didn't finish it. I couldn't read it. I'm like, I'm not going to give my precious earth minutes to this. No, thank you. But yeah, I don't see how it could have redeemed itself whatsoever. It was just bizarre. It just really felt like a tween's fiction. In 4th place, we have House of Leaves. So I had wanted to read this book for a very long time, and I just couldn't get it at my library. And then it finally came in all these years later. I don't even know what to say about it. I can't even tell you what was going on. It was just so confusing and dry and boring, and I just didn't care. And I kept pushing through. I'm like, maybe something exciting will happen. Yeah, no. Biggest letdown, to be honest, because I had spent so many years wanting to read it, and I just thought, what the fuck is this? When I did read it. So that's why it made my list. In 3rd position, we have Shadowcaster 2. So I did have to go back on Goodreads to refresh my memory of what this was actually about. And luckily I had left a review, and I basically said it was very juvenile. The weak characters suck. There is no world building at all, and it is all just dialogue. So that is a big pet peeve of mine, obviously, when I'm a big character-based reader. I like fleshed out characters. I can't have just all dialogue and nothing else going on. Am I reading like a script for a TV show? Like, what is this? And it's juvenile, so I felt like obviously all the characters were young. I think the protagonist is 19, but she read just it's not meant to be YA because she's sort of like an adult. So, but it read like a very young YA, and that's why I was like, okay, no, not for me. In 2nd place, we have the Penny Dreadful graphic novel. So I picked this up because I wanted to continue the story after the show had ended horribly with Vanessa's death. I wanted to see more of Vanessa, and she was on the cover, bro. She was on the front cover of this graphic novel, so I assumed, oh great, Vanessa's going to be in it. No, and that's why I gave it 2 stars. I was so disappointed. They hooked me in, catfished by the cover. They promised Vanessa and they did not deliver. And I just don't care about the other characters. Yeah, sure, Ethan was cool, but I don't care. I was in that mostly for the romance between him and Vanessa. And that's what I wanted more of, and I didn't get it. And I was very, very angry about it. In 1st place with 1 star, I almost never give 1 stars. It's Gothika. Now, there's a story about this. So I started seeing this book on YouTube everywhere, people talking about how horrible it was. Some people loved it. A lot of people were like, what is this problematic book? And it piqued my interest enough that I thought, let's give it a go. So I looked it up on Goodreads, and to my absolute surprise, I had already read it and rated it 1 star. And I was like, what? was this book so bad that I completely obliterated it from my memory, just purged it out into the ether. My brain was like, nope, let's burn that bitch. We got to forget we've ever read it. Because I gave it 1 star. And like I said, I don't think I've really ever given anything else 1 star. I just feel too horrible to do it. Like, I don't like doing it. It makes me feel bad. But I obviously hated this book so vehemently that I'm like, 1 star bitch. This was at a time when I was not writing reviews. So I don't know my feelings about it. But obviously, like I said, it was so bad that I'd completely forgotten it. And also rated it 1 star. So Gothika is coming in at number 1. So those are all my favorites. Sorry, I'm just petting my cat. You can't see, but I've got a little cat down here and I'm giving her all the rubs. So that's all the best and the worst of this year. Going forward, I'm hoping, like I said, to be a bit more selective with what I read, to pace myself a little more. I'm still hoping to read through all genres. Fantasy romance, that's my bread and butter. That's what brings me the most heart butterflies. And so I will continue to read a lot from that genre. Same as nonfiction. I will always have nonfiction going on because it's my palate cleanser. It's what I read between stories to just clean the mind and get it ready for a brand new story and new characters to love. I'm also hoping to do some maybe reading vlogs for particular books, so that will be spoilery because you'll see my reactions as I go through it. But if anyone's got any recommendations of videos they want to see me make or books they want to see me read, please let me know below. This year was a pretty fantastic year of reading. There was a lot of books, not as many 5 stars as I would hoped. That was a very short list. Like, there pretty much were only 10 5 stars and I added a 4.75 on there for shits and giggles. So I'm hoping to get a lot more 5-star reads this year because that makes me sad that I read over 400 books and there were only 10 5 stars. But that, like I said, is because I was just reading willy-nilly, man. I was just whatever I could get, whatever came up on my, e-reader, whatever's at the library. I was like, just give it to me and I will consume it. So I'm hoping this year there's going to be a lot of 5-star reads. But I hope that wherever you are, you have an amazing end of the year and a glorious start to the new one. And as always, stay wild, Star Child.